All right, good afternoon, everyone. This should be TI versus AN. It looks like from the participants list, that's who's here. So that's a good start. I'd like, first of all, before we get going, does anyone have issues? I guess I should check with the scoring judges and just have them confirm thumbs up or otherwise that they can see and hear. Okay. Great. All right. First we will go through the preliminary matters. I'd like to remind all participants not performing right at the moment, coaches and observers, to mute their audio and video. And one student from each team, please introduce your team members.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
My name is Eli Walkley, and I will be doing the opening statements for plaintiff. Our opening statement will be presented by Piper Stolting. Our closing statement will be presented by Adeline McKenzie. Samuel Selnick will be presenting the direct of Elliot Kress. Piper Stolting will be presenting the direct of Lolo Baldwin. Vala Algaze will be presenting the direct of Allie Pinkerton. I will be presenting the cross of Brownie Parker and Dolray Mapp, and Talia Ganauer will be presenting the cross of Pat Hurst. Our witnesses will now introduce themselves in the order in which they appear.
Hello, my name is Finley Carpenter, and I will be portraying Lolo Baldwin.
My name is Theo Miranda Zelnick, and today I will be portraying Elliot Kress.
Hello, my name is Nyla Huff, and today I'll be portraying Allie Pinkerton.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, and the defendant.
Hi, my name is Luke Fauché. I represent the defense along with Brooklyn Ramirez and Sarah Fleshman, as well as Ashley Metz playing Bronnie Parker, Leah Sifke playing Pat Hurst, and Carter Hampton playing Dolray Mapp. Yeah, and that's all.
All right. Does either team have an objection to recording if one person on each team could either could answer?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
The defense also has no objections.
Great. I'd like to remind everyone that they may only be there if they're associated with a performing team. Teams are limited to the information in the materials and what can be reasonably inferred. There are time limitations, and time stops during objections. Our timekeepers, if you could answer whether you are ready.
I'm ready, Your Honor.
Great. All witnesses must be called. Students, I would ask you to affirm that you have read and will abide by the mock trial rules and code of ethical conduct. I will now swear in all witnesses. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Yes, Your Honor.
Excellent. All right. Unless there are any preliminary matters, let's go to plaintiff's opening statement.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and may it please the court. My name is Piper Stolting, and today I'll be delivering the opening statement for the prosecution. Your Honor and members of the jury, today you'll be presented with the case of 2 armed robberies. In this trial, you'll hear evidence proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Bronnie Parker committed these crimes. There are many pieces to this case, which all add up to Bronnie Parker's guilt. From the beginning, we ask ourselves, who committed these crimes? Who had the motivation, the means, the desperation, and the knowledge to pull off these robberies? Bronnie Parker is the only answer that adds up. Today, pay attention to two very important facts. First, that Bronnie Parker was a security consultant for the very bank that was robbed. And second, that Bronnie Parker was 5 months and $5,000 behind on their mortgage payments. Now, let's take a few steps back. Bronnie Parker was a security technician for the Cascade Community Bank. But that wasn't her only tie to the bank. In 2018, she worked with Lolo Baldwin, the bank manager, to take out a mortgage on her dream home. But last January, Ms. Parker lost her job at the security company. With no job and no income, Ms. Parker fell behind on her mortgage payments and was in danger of foreclosure. Lolo Baldwin recognized Ms. Parker's struggles and pushed back the foreclosure date twice. But time passed and no payment came. August 13th, the foreclosure date crept closer and closer. And suddenly, on August 9th, 3 days before Ms. Parker's balance was due, the Dullsville branch was robbed at gunpoint. Next, on August 11th, the other bank branch was robbed by the same robber, who got away with thousands of dollars in small bills stashed in a paper bag. Just 1 day after the second robbery, Bronnie Parker walked into the Dullsville branch and handed Lolo Baldwin a check for $5,212.14, the exact balance due. The defendant was desperate. She was going to lose her home. So Ms. Parker took matters into her own hands and took advantage of her previous job. Today, you will hear Lolo Baldwin, the bank manager, testify that in late 2020, the defendant scheduled camera updates for both branches of the bank, causing there to be no video footage. Today, you will hear that they were on the exact days of the two robberies. Ms. Parker found a way out and took it. In doing so, the defendant left a trail which Detective Elliot Kress followed. Lolo Baldwin will testify that he provided the detective with a description of the robber that matched Ms. Parker. Mr. Baldwin also identified the getaway car as a blue sedan, the same car you will hear that Ms. Parker drives. Members of the jury, the defense will try to convince you that Ms. Parker sold her car to pay her debt. But Detective Kress will tell you that Ms. Parker still has the title. You will see that she still owns this car. You will also hear from Allie Pinkerton, a computer forensics specialist. She followed a tracker placed in the robber's bag, which led to the exit ramp to Chalmers Casino, the very casino that Ms. Parker will testify to visiting after both of the robberies. The floor manager of the casino, Pat Hurst, will testify that Ms. Parker came to gamble with thousands of dollars in small bills stashed in a paper bag, exactly what the robber had escaped with. Pat Hurst will also testify that Ms. Parker arrived in the clothes the robber wore. Members of the jury, add it up. Ms. Parker was running out of time. She knew she had to find the money somehow or lose her home. And today, it will be obvious what the defendant chose, because the next day, Ms. Parker walked into the bank holding a check worth the exact balance due. So let's add it up. Bronnie Parker had the motivation, the means, the desperation, and the knowledge to pull off these robberies. We, the prosecution, will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty on 2 counts of robberies in the first degree. And after all the evidence you'll be presented with today, the prosecution is confident that you will find Bronnie Parker guilty and add it all up. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Now the opening statement for the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, members of the jury, Bronnie Parker is your run-of-the-mill, do-it-yourself kind of person. She has worked hard for what she has, and whether it's baseball or bass guitar, she's not afraid to pursue her dreams. But when music didn't pan out for Miss Parker, she worked odd jobs, scraping together enough money to attend night classes at Coho Community College, earning an associate's degree in computer security. In 2014, Bronny used that degree to get a job at Doing Security, where she worked there for 6 years and was trusted to provide and schedule maintenance up to security systems throughout the county. That is until early 2020, when an unsubstantiated accusation led her to lose her job and faced the decision to sell her car. It was her only mode of transportation. She held out for as long as she could, eventually selling her car to pay off her mortgage payments. Then, feeling relieved she could make her payments, she decided to go to the casino. Now, that might not seem like a good idea to the ordinary person, but our first witness, Pat Hurst, the casino floor manager, will tell you otherwise. Pat Hurst's testimony will bring out 3 things. 1, that Bronny was at the casino both days of the robbery. 2, that Bronny wins more often than she loses. And 3, that on both nights she went, Bronny came out of the casino with more money than she started with. After 2 good nights at the casino, Bronny got Ms. Hurst to write a check for the amount due on Bronny's mortgage. One of the prosecution's own witnesses, Lolo Baldwin, is the manager at the first bank that was robbed and was there when the robbery took place. Baldwin never recognized the robber as the person we now know to be Bronny Parker. Baldwin called the police 4 days after the robbery because Bronny had finally come up with the money to pay off her mortgage. Baldwin was suspicious of Bronny because they didn't know how Miss Parker had come up with the money. But we do. Because of Bronny Parker's testimony, which is backed up by Pat Hurst, we know that Bronny had sold her car to come up with the cash. Bronny herself will testify that she was at home and at the casino both days of the robbery, and that after selling her car and a bit of luck at the casino, she was finally able to pay off her mortgage payments. The evidence will show that Bronny wasn't even aware the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings on August 13th if she didn't pay. Dolray Mapp, our expert witness, is a private investigator and will reveal that Bronny Parker's cell phone data indicates that she was not at either branch of the Dolesville Bank when it was robbed. Allie Pinkerton, the prosecution's expert witness, will reveal that they only tracked the robber's location and never Bronny Parker's. They were not able to access critical information like Bronny's email, her phone number, or anything that would allow them to actually track Mrs. Parker. Bronny Parker was arrested by Elliot Kress. The testimony will show that Detective Kress operates on hunches and gut feelings, and that 2 witnesses, each at different robberies, both report that the robber was bigger and heavier than Bronny Parker. Kress never looked into Bronny's car or investigated anyone else for the crime. This case is an example of an unfinished investigation. Not looking into anyone else and neglecting other leads, Kress doesn't paint the full picture. There's pressure on all police officers to close a case, but if Bronny Parker is convicted and the case is closed, the doors of injustice will be left wide open. The prosecution needs to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that Bronny is guilty. That means that if you are anything less than almost certain, you must rule in favor of the defense. After all the facts are presented, we are confident that you will see through the prosecution's weak attempt to close a case and put an innocent woman behind bars, and that you will choose the only fair verdict, which is that Bronny Parker is not guilty. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, counsel. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the drill by this point, but between witnesses or after statements, we'll pause for a few seconds to allow the scoring judges to fill out their ballots. So let's do that. Okay, first witness for the prosecution.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Lolo Baldwin to the stand. Good afternoon, Mr. Baldwin. Why are you here today?
Yeah, well, I'm the local manager of the Dolesville Cascade Community Bank. So I'm here to talk about the Cascade Community Bank robberies, specifically the one that I witnessed on Monday the 9th.
And what do you remember about the first robbery on the 9th?
Well,
Objection calls for a narrative.
Response.
This is to, Your Honor, this is not calling for a narrative response. It is simply to start off the line of questioning of what Mr. Baldwin recalls of the robbery.
I'll allow it as well, I'm sorry, before I allow it, counsel for the defense, do you have any arguments?
Well, it's a little broad, but I suppose I'll retract my objection.
Okay, thank you. I'll allow it as a preliminary matter, but please try to avoid a narrative with the answer.
Right, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, your response?
yeah, so like I was saying, we opened around 9 a.m. when we always open, and the robber came in immediately. They were wearing a black hoodie, black gloves, black mask, and then blue jeans and white sneakers.
And what specifically did the robber do after they entered?
Well, they came up to the counter and they pointed a gun at my chest. And then they threw me a paper bag with a printed note that read, "Put everything behind the counter in the bag."
Did you do that?
I mean, yeah, I didn't feel like I had much choice. I needed to keep everyone in the situation safe. So I went behind the counter and I did as the note said.
About how much money did the robber take?
I would estimate probably a little over $3,000 in small bills.
Okay, and then what happened next once the robber had the money?
Well, they snatched the bag back and then ran out and drove away. Unfortunately, I was not able to catch the license plate of the car, but it was a blue sedan.
Did you call the police?
Yeah, after the robber left, I hit the button under the teller's counter to alert the local sheriff's office.
And who came after you alerted the authorities?
Detective Elliot Kress.
Did you speak to Kress?
Yeah, I basically just told him everything that I have told you here today.
Okay. Let's take a step back. Do you know the defendant, Miss Parker?
Yeah. She was a security consultant for doing security. So she worked to manage the bank's security systems.
What specifically did she do for her job?
Yeah, she would come in, every couple of months, look at the security cameras and everything. And if she thought that there were any updates or changes to be made, she would let us know and get that done.
Was that her only connection to the bank?
No, actually, she was also a client of the bank. In 2018, I want to say, she came in and asked me if I would help her take out a mortgage on her dream home. And, of course, I was happy to help.
And was Miss Parker consistent on her mortgage payments?
Yeah, she was fairly consistent up until February of 2021 when we did not receive a payment from her, unfortunately.
Did you ever try to reach her?
Well, yeah, I tried to call her and found that unfortunately the line had been disconnected. So after she missed more payments, I went out to her house to check in, make sure everything was okay.
Did you get a chance to talk to Miss Parker?
I did, yeah. She let me know that she had unfortunately lost her job at doing security and was struggling with her income. I let her know that generally foreclosure begins on 120 days of non-payment, but since she was going through a hard time, I was willing to push it back to August 1st.
When was the date?
August 1st.
Did Ms. Parker make the payment?
Unfortunately, no, she did not.
All right, Your Honor, my co-counsel is now retrieving what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4. Mr. Baldwin, can you please identify this exhibit?
Yeah, that is the foreclosure letter that I mailed to Bronny Parker.
Your Honor, at this time, I request that Exhibit 4 be entered into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Any objection?
I would ask that a little more than just one question be asked to verify its authenticity.
It was my understanding that authenticity was stipulated too. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Did you have any other objection?
No, I don't think so.
All right. The exhibit is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, what did you say in the foreclosure letter?
Well, as you can see, it basically just says that we haven't received any payment from her since February. So if she was not able to get in her full amount, which was $5,212, then we would have to foreclose on her house on August 12th, 2021, if she didn't get it in by then.
Is the amount for her balance stated in the foreclosure letter?
Yeah, you can see it right at the bottom of the first paragraph.
Thank you, co-counsel. You may stop screen sharing now. Mr. Baldwin, I'd like to touch on something you talked about earlier when you were talking to Kress. What specifically did you tell Detective Kress when he showed up at the scene?
Well, I described the robber, like I said. I also let him know that unfortunately there wasn't any security footage of what took place.
Why wasn't there any video footage?
Well, our security cameras were actually out for updates and upgrades. It was actually Bronny Parker who had suggested that we made the changes.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding your testimony correctly. Are you saying that Ms. Parker scheduled for the camera updates to be off at that time?
Yes, Ms. Parker was the reason the cameras were off at that time, and it's the same for both branches as well.
Okay, and did you ever hear from Ms. Parker after the robberies?
Yeah, she came in 3 days after our Dolesville branch robbery, which was August 12th.
Why did she stop by?
Well, actually, she had the money to pay off her mortgage, and she came by to give me the check.
And how much was the check made out for?
$5,212.14.
Was that the same amount we addressed in the foreclosure letter earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the exact same amount down to the penny.
All right, and remind me again, when was Ms. Parker's balance due?
August 12th, which was the exact day she brought it in.
Did Ms. Parker tell you where she came up with that money?
Yeah, I was actually, I was curious, so I asked about it. She let me know that she had a lucky night at the casino, but honestly, that didn't really add up to me.
Why didn't it add up to you?
Well, there were a couple of reasons. First of all, Bronny Parker's general height and build was actually really similar to the robber that I saw, along with the fact that she had scheduled the security camera changes and knew about the bank's security systems. And, she was obviously in a really tough time money-wise. It didn't feel right.
Objection. I believe this is an unfair extrapolation being made to imply the end result of the matter.
Just to make sure I understand the objection, you're saying it's an unfair extrapolation from the materials?
Yes, I don't believe that based on the materials, this witness should be able to testify as to whether or not Bronny Parker actually was or was not at the casino. It's also a lack of personal knowledge.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, under Rule 701A, Mr. Baldwin can give a rationally based opinion on his personal perception, which is what he is giving right now.
Okay, but counsel specifically pointed out about what the basis is for his statement about the defendant being at the casino. Can you address that?
My witness never stated that, mentioned the casino.
He mentioned, may I be heard, Your Honor, first?
Yes.
All right. Your witness mentioned that it didn't add up that Bronny Parker had made the money by going to the casino.
Right. And this is, may I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is a statement made by a party opponent, which Mr. Baldwin is relaying in this testimony.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
My objection wasn't on the basis of hearsay, which I believe is what Ms. Stolting was using a response to on her previous thing. I wasn't objecting based on hearsay.
Okay, so as I understand it, the objection is to personal knowledge about the defendant's assertion or testimony that the money came from casino winnings. So I'm going to sustain the objection to that testimony, but you're free to try to lay some foundation for that.
Thank you, Your Honor. I request that that previous answer be struck from the record and that the jury disregard it.
Granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, what did you then do?
Well, I immediately called the sheriff's office and contacted Detective Kress and let him know about my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Hello, Mr. Baldwin.
Hello?
Why don't we start off by addressing the cameras first? Is it correct that when Miss Parker suggested you upgrade your cameras, it was late 2020?
I believe so, yeah.
So in that case, didn't she suggest this upgrade 8 or more months prior to the robbery in August?
Yes.
And she allegedly suggested it before she even began missing payments?
Well, yes, but she would still be aware of when the cameras were scheduled to be out, as she was the one who scheduled it.
And she was still working for doing security when she suggested it, right?
I mean, we wouldn't really have taken her suggestion seriously if she hadn't been working for them. So yes.
Of course. Speaking of which, wasn't it just a routine part of Bronny Parker's job to perform security installations?
Yeah, she was the security manager, so.
Now, why don't we talk about the day of the robbery itself? On the night, the car you saw the robbers speed away in wasn't dark blue, but light blue specifically, as it says in your affidavit. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yes. A light blue sedan.
And you weren't able to tell the make or model of the car, were you?
No, I mean, the robber got in the car and immediately drove off. They didn't exactly wait for me to read the license plates or anything.
So all you know about that car is that it's a blue sedan.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's better than nothing.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the defendant. Mr. Baldwin, you've worked with the defendant for several years. Isn't that right?
Yeah, she worked with us through doing security for several years, like you said.
So you know her appearance pretty well then, don't you?
I would say so. Yeah.
So when you saw the robber on the 9th, though, you didn't immediately think to yourself, hey, that's Bronny Parker, did you?
I mean, no, the robber was wearing a mask, so it's not like I could go off of any facial features.
Okay. Did you consider that it might be Bronny Parker on the 10th or the 11th?
No, honestly, I hadn't been really thinking about Bronny at all until she came in on the 12th. So
despite working with Miss Parker for years, your assumption about her being the robber didn't cross your mind until the 12th. Is that right?
No, it didn't.
And didn't you only reach that conclusion because she finally managed to pay off her mortgage debt?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about people who might have, needed the money, and she came across it really fast, and obviously she was in a place of financial hardship. So I just thought that it might be a possibility, at the very least, enough of a concern to bring it up to Cress.
And so the police only started investigating Miss Parker as a potential suspect because you came to Cress with that assumption you made.
I don't know too much about Cress's investigation. I believe so, but it's not something I'm particularly versed in.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. The witness is excused, and we'll pause for a few seconds before the next witness. All right, the next witness for the state.
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution calls Detective Elliot Kress to the stand. Good evening, Detective Kress.
Pardon me. Good evening.
Can you explain to the jury how you're connected to this case?
Yeah, I'm a detective for the CCSO, or the Cascade County Sheriff's Office. I was the one who investigated Bronny Parker and the Cascade Community Bank robberies on August 9th and 11th.
And what qualifications do you have as a detective?
Well, I mean, I was always interested in the field, so after high school, I got a bachelor's degree in sociology with a focus on criminology and penology specifically. About a year after I graduated, I was then hired by the CCSO as a patrol officer.
Okay, and how long have you worked for the CCSO?
Well, after a decade as a patrol officer, with continued training, of course, I was promoted to a detective, and I've been a detective for 12 years now, so I have over 2 decades of experience in the force, over a decade of which is as a detective.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the court recognize Detective Kress as an expert in the fields of criminology and criminal investigation.
So it was my understanding we didn't need to qualify experts based on the rules this year, but if there's going to be a debate about any expert opinions, we might as well have it now. For the defense, do you have any objections to that?
No objections, Your Honor. I was under the opinion that the two expert witnesses were Dora Mep and Lee Pinkerton, but I don't think there's any rules against it, so no objections.
Okay. And counsel for the defense, if there is expert opinions given, I'll give you the opportunity to renew any objections. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Detective Kress, how did you get involved with this particular case?
Well, on the morning of August 9th, I was notified of a robbery at the Dullsville branch of the Cascade Community Bank. I drove there as fast as I could, and I got there about a half hour later.
And how did you begin your investigation there?
Well, I started by interviewing the two bank tellers who are currently serving the bank. That was Lolo Baldwin and Johnny Connolly.
How did these witnesses seem to be composed when you interviewed them?
Well, Mr. Baldwin, although he was a little bit shaken, seemed very calm to me and answered all of my questions clearly. Mr. Connolly, though, was just about the opposite. He started through everything he said, and he couldn't seem to focus on what I was asking him. It was clear to me that his recollection of the robbery wouldn't be nearly as accurate or reliable as Mr. Baldwin's.
I see. And you've heard Mr. Baldwin testify in court to the events of the robbery. Is that also what they told you at the bank?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I heard that the robber came in just after the bank opened, holding a silver handgun, and had them put money in a paper bag, and that the robber got away with about $3,000.
Did you hear any descriptions of the robber themselves today?
Well, Mr. Baldwin said the same things that I've heard him say in court. Basically, that the robber was wearing white shoes, jeans, a dark hoodie, a black mask, and black gloves. He also gave a physical description of the robber, similar to who I actually now know to be Bronny Parker. Mr. Connolly's description at the bank wasn't exactly the same, but again, Mr. Baldwin seemed a lot more certain of his description.
I see. Was there any other notable evidence at the bank?
Unfortunately, there wasn't anything else of use. The robber was wearing gloves, which left no fingerprints, and there was no security footage. As I've just heard Mr. Baldwin testify, actually, Miss Parker was the one who scheduled the cameras to be down.
Okay. So after all of this, what main leads did you have to follow so far?
Well, my main lead at that point was the blue sedan that the witnesses described and the descriptions of the robber herself.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the day of the 11th. How did you hear about the second robbery that morning?
Well, I was alerted to the second robbery. This time it was at the other branch of the Cascade Community Bank.
And how did you begin your investigation there?
Well, there were a few witnesses there, and I started by talking with one of the tellers, Chris Perucci. He seemed a bit rattled. He was breathing into a paper bag when I arrived and said he couldn't believe what had just happened.
Okay. And what was it that Mr. Perucci was able to tell you?
Well, actually, as far as his physical description of the robber, it lined up just about exactly with Mr. Baldwin's, being the same build and height as Ms. Parker. But more importantly, he told me that he'd managed to slip a GPS tracker into the robber's bag before they got away.
How did you go about locating that device?
Well, I immediately contacted my colleague, Alec Pinkerton, the CCSO's computer forensics specialist. She tracked it, and I drove after it as the robber went down Interstate 4.
Okay. Well, what happened to the tracker?
Well, I drove after the tracker that was tracking the robber, but unfortunately, just a short while before I could catch up, the tracker actually came to a stop. I found it discarded on the side of the road, having been thrown out of the car. It was right next to an exit ramp, and I actually noticed that exit ramp led directly into the parking lot of Chalmers Casino.
Interesting. So, after all of this, how did you proceed with your investigation?
Well, unfortunately, there wasn't any other information at the bank like last time, and the other witnesses didn't have anything new to tell me. So after that, I was just waiting to hope that I could proceed with my investigation somehow.
Okay, and how did you proceed with your investigation?
Well, the next day, actually, Mr. Baldwin called me and told me everything that he just told the court about Ms. Parker. And after that conversation, the evidence that I had gathered so far was beginning to add up, and I was a bit suspicious of Ms. Parker myself. She really seemed to match just about all the evidence that I'd seen so far.
And what made Ms. Parker such a good match?
Well, like I said before, and like it's certainly true. I mean, it's pretty weird to see two banks of the two branches of the same bank robbed in such a short time period, especially pretty small banks. But Ms. Parker actually has direct ties to that specific bank, and along with that, the descriptions that I received of the robber lined up with their height and build. She even had motive too. Ms. Parker needed to pay off her mortgage on her house that exact week.
All right, so were you ever able to talk to Ms. Parker yourself?
Yes, I was. After that call, I drove to Ms. Parker's house to ask her a few questions. I'd never want to arrest someone, obviously, who's innocent, and I would always want to get their side of the story before I would do something as rash as arresting someone based on just what other people told me.
Of course. How did she react to seeing you there?
Well, she actually seemed pretty defensive right off the bat, before I even had a chance to introduce myself to her, actually.
So what was it that you asked her about first?
Well, after I identified myself, of course, I asked her a few questions about a light blue sedan and asked if she had seen a similar one in the area. She hesitantly told me that she'd actually owned a similar car, but she claimed that she had sold it a few days prior.
Was she able to give you any details about this supposed car sale?
No, she didn't give me any details at all. She told me that she'd sold it to some person on Craigslist who paid in cash, and she said she couldn't remember anything else significant about them, despite the fact that she claimed the sale was only a few days ago.
Okay, sure. So, were you ever able to search Ms. Parker's home?
Yeah, well, but obviously, I was hoping to search at that time if it was possible, but before I could even do any of that, Ms. Parker just slammed the door shut on my face and didn't let me ask any more questions. Uh, at that point, I was getting pretty suspicious. I mean, there was a lot of evidence, and she was not even willing to cooperate with me, so I came back with warrants to search her house and to arrest her.
Did you find anything significant in her home?
Yeah, I actually found multiple things that tied Ms. Parker to the robberies. I found a dark hoodie, jeans, and black gloves, which are all things that the robber was seen wearing. And pretty importantly, I also found the title to her blue sedan, which was still in her name, even though she claimed that she had sold it.
So, Detective Kress, after all of this, what was your final conclusion?
Well, after my investigation and all the evidence I gathered, I think there's no room for doubt that Bronnie Parker robbed those banks, and I'm very confident in that.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is not allowed to give opinion on the final decision of the case.
Your response?
Your Honor, under rule, I believe it's 705, Detective Kress is allowed to give an opinion on the ultimate issue specifically. This is perfectly admissible.
7.
Did you have anything to say for the defense?
If it's okay, I would ask the prosecution to explain what 705 is exactly.
My apologies, I meant 704, which is opinion on ultimate issue, states that an opinion on the ultimate issue of the trial is not automatically objectionable.
I asked both counsel to address 704B.
Yes, Your Honor.
Starting with the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor, I'd ask for a moment to confer with the case packet. Your Honor, Rule 704B states that in this case, an expert must not state an opinion about whether the defendant did or not have a mental state or condition that constitutes an element of crime. This simply isn't the case here.
Okay, and the defense?
The way I understand the prosecution isn't doing or talking about Miss Parker's mental state. So I don't think 704B has any merit, but not 704A not automatically objectionable. Doesn't mean it's not objectionable. And also, I would like. Also, I feel that the objection could also be raised of lack of personal knowledge, as Detective Kress isn't sure that Bronny Parker committed the crime.
May I respond?
Yeah, respond to the personal knowledge issue.
Yes, Rule 704 does, in fact, the purpose of it is to state that an opinion of the ultimate issue is not automatically objectionable, as opposing counsel just stated. And as for a lack of personal knowledge objection, again, under Rule 704, this is an opinion. Detective Chris is not stating that it is true. It is stating that it is his opinion. So again, under Rule 704, it's admissible.
Okay. Thank you, counsel. I'm going to sustain the objection. I do think that ultimate issues of guilt or innocence are for the jury and not for an expert to opine on. So that objection will be sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Kress, what made you so confident, whatever your conclusion was? What was the evidence that you had gathered?
Well, I mean, the evidence that I gathered was that Ms. Parker has motive to commit the crime, that she matches the descriptions given at the crime scene, that she has no verifiable alibi for the times of the crime. All of the evidence that I gathered in my professional investigation added up, and it was enough for me to make my very confident arrest and proceed with this trial.
Thank you, Detective Kress. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Crest, you talked to two witnesses at the scene of the first robbery, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And one of them was Johnny Connolly, the bank's assistant manager, right?
Yes, one of them was Lola Baldwin and the other was Johnny Connolly.
And Johnny estimated that the robber was 5 or 6 inches taller.
Objection, Your Honor. This statement by Johnny Connolly is hearsay under Rule 801 and is inadmissible under Rule 802 because of that.
Response?
Because Johnny Connolly was testifying to, or I would say that this is a present sense impression, as they had just witnessed the robbery and were giving the report to the police, and therefore it's not hearsay.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, this was about approximately 35 minutes after the robbery had occurred. It was not right after and does not fall under this exception.
Okay, well, I'm not clear. Are we asking for a statement about what this witness who isn't present observed, or why not, for the defense, provide an offer of proof about what the declarant was going to say?
What the declarant was going to say? My question was, and Johnny estimated that the robber was 5 or 6 inches taller and 30 or 40 pounds heavier than Bronny. Is that right?
I'm going to overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kress, Johnny estimated that the robber was 5 or 6 inches taller and 30 or 40 pounds heavier than Bronny, right?
Well, he was very unsure in everything he was telling me. I think he did give a slightly different estimate, but again, he was very disturbed at the time, and I found it hard to believe that he could have a great memory of the robberies.
So that's a yes to my question then.
Yes, he did give a slightly different description.
And this difference in description didn't bother you at all, right?
Well, I wouldn't say it didn't bother me. I considered it in my investigation just as I would consider any evidence I saw. But because of his mental state and because of the fact that multiple other witnesses had seen a different height and weight, it seemed likely to me that since he was disturbed at the time, it would not be as important towards finding the actual height and build of the robber, which would match, in this case, happened to match Ms. Parker.
But later at the second robbery of the Dulceville Bank, one of the tellers, Chris Perucci, also told you that the robber could have been taller and heavier than the person we now all know to be.
Your Honor. This statement by Chris Perucci is also hearsay under Rule 801 and is inadmissible.
Your Honor, again, they're talking to the police. I would say that this is, again, they're describing their present sense impression.
May I respond? Your Honor, the present tense impression rule 801 subsection 803 subsection 1, my apologies, states that it is a statement describing or explaining an event or condition made while or immediately after the declarant perceived it. Again, this is a whole 35 minutes after the event and is not fall under this exception.
Okay, and anything final from the defense?
I'm sorry, but can I ask what specific rule it was again, counsel?
803 subsection 1, the exception that you are using.
Oh, I see. No, Your Honor.
Okay, I think actually the prosecution may have convinced me I was wrong the first time, but if I'm going to be wrong, I'll be consistently wrong. So I'm going to overrule the objection and allow the testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kress, later at the second robbery of the Dillsville Bank, one of the tellers, Chris Perucci, also told you that the robber could have been taller and heavier than the person we all now know to be Bronny Parker. Is that right?
Well, what actually happened was Chris Perucci told me a description that actually matched Ms. Parker, and then he later came back after more time had passed after the robbery and said he wasn't entirely sure in his first thing and gave a slightly different second one. But again, this was made even further after the first robbery and made me less confident in it because obviously the more time that passes after an event, the more likely you are to have the events get foggy, especially specific details like height and weight.
Yeah.
So for that,
sorry. But Chris Perucci gave you two bits of information. One that was about, or the second time he spoke to you, he gave you two bits of information, and one was about the height and weight of Bronny Parker, and another was about a tracker that he slipped into Bronny Parker or the robber's bag, and and you believed the second one. Is that right?
well, I wouldn't just believe it only because he said it, but obviously once I contacted my colleague Allie Pinkerton, she was able to specifically confirm that it was true. I didn't just go tracing out, running after what he said happened. I confirmed it with.
It was true.
Yes, it was true that he put a robber in the bag, but that's a very specific thing, not something as nebulous as height and weight, which you're more likely to get fogged up as time passes.
So moving on to the car the robber drove, the description you got was a light blue sedan, right?
Yes, I got a description of a light blue sedan from multiple witnesses.
But you didn't have a make or model, is that right?
I don't believe there was a specific make and model. It was the getaway car, so they didn't have time to see the exact model.
And isn't it true that there are a lot of light blue sedans around Cascade County?
Well, I would say there's definitely a fair number. It's not something everyone has, obviously, but it's not a particularly uncommon car either.
Mm-hmm. There's so many that you describe searching for the car as a needle in a haystack. Is that correct?
Well, I would certainly say that if the only evidence that I had to find a robber was just a car that they owned, then it would not be enough to find them, and it would probably be like a needle in a haystack. But obviously, if you can combine this with other identifiers, they very quickly become very specific and can pinpoint towards one specific person, which is actually what happened in this case.
And you never found Bronny Parker's car, is that right?
Well, again, no. Bronny Parker told me that she had sold it, but couldn't remember anything about who she sold it to, even their name or contacts of their logs or anything. So because of that, it seemed very likely to me that she had simply put the car somewhere else by the time I came to visit, because it'd be pretty suspicious if she still had it. However, she did still actually have the title to a blue Lincoln Town car, which is the model that people saw. So clearly she did own the car.
You never looked for Bronny's car then, right?
Well, I mean, I found the title to her car, still in her name,
but never the car, right?
I wanted to look for the car, actually. I very much did, but I was unable to. Ms. Parker couldn't tell me anything about the supposed person she sold it to, so I had no way to go after it at all.
Well, you had a title with a license plate and stuff, didn't you?
I did have the title, yes, but again, I had no idea where to look for that specific car. I wasn't about to go on a potentially months-long goose hunt for one car in this entire state when I already knew that she still owned it.
Okay. And when you searched, moving on to when you searched Bronnie Parker's house, um, you found black hoodie jeans and black leather gloves, correct?
Yes, I did find those items, which all actually line up to what the robber was wearing at the time of both robberies.
But you didn't find a silver handgun, a mask, or even white sneakers, is that right?
No, it's very common in a robbery that a robber will dispose of the most identifiable items, like in this case, the car or a gun.
Mhm.
It makes a lot of sense that a robber wouldn't want to still own those and would therefore dispose of them safely.
But that's pure speculation, right? You don't know if the robber did that in this case.
Well, I wouldn't say it's pure speculation. After having been a detective for 12 years, I've seen quite a
But
few.
you're not sure, right?
No, I don't know for complete certain about that specific aspect of the robbery, but it makes a lot of sense as a professional detective for
Okay.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Kress, why was it that you chose to weigh Ms. Baldwin's and Mr. Prucci's first description in your investigation more?
Well, like I said before, I chose to weigh Ms. Baldwin's description more, obviously, at the first robbery, simply because she was more confident in it. She seemed to know what she was saying more, and she seemed a lot more put together at the time. With Chris Perucci's descriptions, I chose to weigh his first description more because first of all, he just made it closer to the robbery. I mean, he made it at a time when there would have been less things floating around in his head, when he would have had less things to consider that could potentially start to fog his vision. I can't remember the height and build of everyone that I saw a long time ago, but someone that I just saw, it's a lot more likely.
And why was it that you chose to not go after the car that Bronnie Parker had allegedly sold?
Well, I mean, like I tried to say, I really didn't have any way to. Ms. Parker didn't give me any details about who she sold it to, where I could track them down, their contact information, even though I would have assumed she had this if she actually made the sale. Yeah, and furthermore, I just wasn't gonna do all of that for a car that she still owned the title to. It just didn't make sense.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. The witness may step down. All right. The third witness for the state.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Allie Pinkerton to the stand. Good afternoon, Ms. Pinkerton.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, of course. I'm Allie Pinkerton. I specialize in computer forensics and have been working at the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, or the CCSO, for 7 years now.
Okay, and what did you do for the CCSO?
I mostly look into criminals' electronic history and GPS data evidence. I've also appeared in court before for cases I may work on.
Okay, you said you specialized in computer forensics. How did you get your job at the CCSO?
Well, I double majored in computer science and physics in college and received my bachelor's degrees from both those fields in Stanford. I've also attended multiple lectures and classes about GPS technology, and I work frequently with that technology for my job at the CCSO.
So, how did you get into the field of computer sciences and technology?
I've been coding since I was 11 and actually coded for a social media company before I worked at the CCSO.
Okay. Your Honor, I ask that Ms. Pinkerton be recognized as an expert in the fields of location technology and GPS tracking.
Any objection?
Your Honor.
Go ahead with your questioning then.
Thank you. Now, let's go to the week of the robberies. When did you become involved in the investigation?
I was informed about the first robbery on the 9th, but there were no leads I could follow until the second robbery occurred, which is when I was officially involved in the investigation.
And what did that look like?
Well, Detective Kress called me on the 11th and informed me that there had been a second robbery at a different branch of the bank that had been robbed a couple days earlier, and that a GPS device had been planted on a stolen bag of cash.
And what was your first step?
Once Detective Kress informed me of this, I immediately logged onto my computer and began tracking the device.
So, where did you first see the GPS location?
I first saw the GPS show up traveling north on Interstate 4 towards Row. Around 35 minutes after I started tracking it, it arrived at the Zell Avenue exit.
And what did it do once it got to the Zell Avenue exit?
It appeared at first to continue past the exit, but it then reappeared correctly at the exit ramp.
So, what do you think happened with the GPS?
The continued movement was most likely caused by prediction technology. GPS data is recorded about every second or so. It requires a computer to predict its movements. So once the computer received the new data, it corrected itself and appeared on the ramp.
Are there any other possibilities?
Technically, the robber could have thrown it out the window and continued down the highway, but that is highly unlikely. I mean, how far is that throw? And also,
all right. So your time is up. I'll let you finish your sentence, and I'll give the defense similar extra 10 seconds to finish the sentence if they need it. But go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Thank you. The GPS would have shown the tracker bouncing along the road as it skidded on the pavement, which it didn't do. It just came to a dead stop, which indicates that it was dropped at a stop onto the exit ramp.
All right. So that ends the prosecution's time. Cross-examination, I think you have about a minute left.
Your Honor. Ms. Pinkerton, you have no way to confirm that who you were tracking was Bronny Parker, correct?
Unfortunately, no. I did send in a request for a geoface tracking from Google, but received no response back.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything further from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Is the first defense witness ready? Defense can go ahead with their first witness.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call their first witness, Pat Hurst, to the stand. Good afternoon, Ms. Hurst. Good afternoon. Ms. Hurst, we're having difficulties with your connection. Do you want to give it a second, or we can? I think.
Are you able now? I'm sorry.
Ms. Hurst, do you want to If it's all right with Your Honor, is it all right if Miss Hurst turns off the camera?
Yeah, that's fine.
Miss Hurst, what is your current occupation?
I'm just your typical floor manager at Chalmers Casino.
And what are your responsibilities as floor manager?
So I have two responsibilities. I work both the cage and the floor. So at the cage, I'm in charge of cashing chips or exchanging them for money for the players to use. And then on the floor, I'm in charge of just overseeing the games and people playing.
And how do you know the defendant, Miss Parker?
So Miss Parker has come in to the casino for about a decade now. She's kind of a regular here. I've known her since about 2000 about a month.
Could you repeat that, Miss Hurst?
Sure, sorry. So Ms. Parker comes in about once a month, and she's kind of a regular here. I've known her for about a decade.
And is there a game she usually plays?
Yeah, she's really good at Texas Hold'em. You should see her.
Objection, Your Honor. Rule 404, character evidence. Opposing counsel is attempting to use Miss Parker's character trait of being good at poker to show that they would act in accordance, which is inadmissible under Rule 404.
Any response?
Your Honor, I'm not using this to say that Miss Parker ever acted in any accordance. I'm just using it to say, to explain how Bronny Parker made up the money, which is the question being asked today in court. How did Bronny Parker make up the money?
The prosecution, any response to that? And I guess I'm puzzled whether being good at poker is a character trait. So if you could address that too.
If opposing counsel is using the fact that they're good at poker to show why they made up the money, then they are attempting to show that they would act in accordance with this trait to gain this money. And poker would be considered a character trait because it is a game of luck and doesn't involve the skill that like a character trait would not have.
Defense? Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm still not convinced, so I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Hurst, do you mind repeating your answer? Is there a game Ms. Parker usually plays when she comes into the casino?
Yeah, Miss Parker plays Texas Hold'em all the time, and she's very good at it. You should see her. She's a natural.
And on August 9th, did Miss Parker come into the casino?
Yeah, she did. She came in around 4:30 in the evening.
And did she have anything with her?
Yeah, she came in with cash like you typically do to play at casinos.
And how much cash does she have with her?
I'd say about $2,000, I believe.
And did she win anything that day?
She must have, because when I went and cashed in her chips, it added up to about $3,000.
And was that the last time you saw Miss Parker?
No, I saw her again on the 10th, I think. She came in around noon.
And what was your interactions like that day? Ms. Hurst, what was
she came in and played, and then she came in to cash her chips back in, and asked me to write a check.
Your Honor, Rule 801 hearsay. the statement that Ms. Parker asked Ms. Hurst to write a check is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter asserted, which is inadmissible.
Any response?
Your Honor, could I have the prosecution explain their objection a bit more?
Well, yeah, go ahead, counsel, for the prosecution if you have more to say on it.
The statement that Ms. Parker asked Ms. Hurst to write a check is an out-of-court statement. It was never spoken in court, and so it's being used for the truth of the matter asserted, and so therefore it's inadmissible and it's hearsay.
Well, Your Honor, may I rephrase the question? Can we move on?
Yeah, you're welcome to rephrase. I'll sustain the objection for now and feel free to rephrase.
When Ms. Hurst, when Ms. Parker came into the casino that day, how were your interactions with her?
Well, she came in, cashed her chips, and then I wrote a check for her.
And who was that check out to?
Cascade Community Bank.
At this time, I would like to draw the witness's attention to Exhibit 2, which has already been, draw attention to Exhibit 2. Ms. Hurst, can you identify Exhibit 2 for the court?
Yes, that's the check that I wrote for, that's the check that I made out to Cascade Community Bank for Ms. Parker at the casino.
And Ms. Hurst, can you confirm for us that is your name on the check?
Yes, that's my name and signature.
Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 2 into evidence at this time. The authenticity of this exhibit has been stipulated.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
The exhibit is admitted.
And how is the money for this check made up?
With the winnings that she earned that day, and then the winnings that she had earned on Monday, the $3,000.
The defense would like to stop sharing Exhibit 2 at this time. And on both the 9th and 11th, how was Ms. Parker's demeanor?
She was totally calm, and that's what...
Your Honor, Rule 602, lack of personal knowledge. Ms. Hurst is not an expert in Ms. Parker, and so they can't speculate to their feelings by saying that they were calm.
Any response?
Ms. Hurst does have personal knowledge of this. She was at the casino with Ms. Parker, and being calm, she's just saying that she saw and their demeanor was calm, not saying that Ms. Parker felt calm.
I would just ask then that they say that they perceived Ms. Parker as calm and therefore don't speculate to their actual feelings.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Ms. Hurst, thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Hurst, would you mind finishing your answer? How, on both the 9th and 11th, how was Ms. Parker's demeanor?
So Ms. Parker, I perceived her as calm, and which was surprising to me because, when I found out that she was accused of robbery, I was surprised because of that reason.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Hurst.
Cross-exam.
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Ms. Hurst. I'd like to talk about the money that Ms. Parker played with at the casino on the days of the robberies. It was thousands more than she usually plays with, right?
I suppose.
And it was in small bills, correct?
Yeah, that's what I normally give out.
And the money that she brought in was wadded up in a brown paper bag, right?
That's correct, yes.
So just to get this all straight, right after what you now know to be 2 bank robberies Ms. Parker came in to gamble with thousands of dollars in small bills, wadded up in a brown paper bag. Did I get that all right?
Yes, that's correct. But also, I typically cash out my chips in smaller bills, so that's why she could have had those types of bills with her.
But that was a yes to the question.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Earlier during the trial, you heard Lolo Baldwin testify to the robber wearing blue jeans and a dark hoodie to the robberies, right?
Yes.
And when Ms. Parker came in to gamble on the 11th, she was wearing blue jeans and a dark hoodie, right?
Yeah, just like pretty much everyone else there.
But that's a yes?
Yeah, it's really common.
Okay. And when Ms. Parker finished playing on the 11th, she asked you to write a check to her bank for a very specific amount of money, $5,212.14. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe she mentioned that she had been writing it out for a dream home for her bank mortgage, so that would probably make sense.
Okay, but it was for that exact amount of money, right?
Correct.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the witness may step down. Any second witness for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dore Map to the stand. Uh, good evening, Mr. Map. Could you tell us a little bit about your education and early career?
Hi, yes, I graduated from the U of O, Go Ducks, and I got my degree in 1999. And then,
Mr. Map, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
That I started to work for the company called MapQuest.
So what's up? Why don't we try something? If the witness could stop for a second, perhaps if the scoring judges and the cross-examining counsel turn off their video except when speaking, maybe that'll help. Maybe it won't, but let's give that a try.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Mr. Mapp, could you turn off your camera? Okay, thank you. Could you please repeat a little bit about your education and early career?
Well, I got my degree in criminology from the U of O in 1999. Go Ducks! And then afterwards, I started my work for MapQuest until I was let go and the tech bubble burst in 2001. In 2002, I opened my own investigative agency for defense lawyers.
Have you furthered your education since?
Yes, I've taken continuing my education at the Coho Community College on GPS location technology, and I have a certification in GPS and location technology from the Defense Institute of Continuing Education.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to tender Dore Map as an expert in the fields of GPS and location technology.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
You may opine then. Go ahead.
Mr. Mapp, did you look into Allie Pinkerton's affidavit?
Yes, I did.
Did you agree with Allie's ultimate conclusion?
No, it seems strange that Allie is so certain. In my opinion, the GPS could have just as easily been thrown as it could have been dropped.
Thank you. So moving on, did you get access to Bronny's phone?
Yes, I did.
What type of phone does Bronny have?
Bronny has a Google Android device, which is great for my investigation.
Why is that?
Anyone with an Android device is automatically connected to a Google account. So depending on your privacy settings, Google will collect location information on your device every time you use a Google service.
Is it only when a Google app or service is open?
No, sometimes a Google app won't be explicitly open, but it will still be collecting data in the background processes.
And now, is location technology reliable?
It's not foolproof, but it is very reliable.
Now, did Allie Pinkerton ever get access to Bronny's phone?
No, they sent out a request from Google, but for Bronny's location data, but they did not get any.
Now, are you, did you have a chance to download Bronny's data?
Yes, I plotted all the points on a map, which is Exhibit 5.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit 5. Just in case my co-counsel didn't hear, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit 5. Sorry, Your Honor, it seems like we're having some technical difficulties.
Someone else from the defense want to try Exhibit 5, or how do you want to proceed?
I'm sure they're figuring it out. Yeah. Oh. Thank you so much, the prosecution. That's really helpful. Mr. Mapp, could you please, could you identify this exhibit?
Yeah, it's a map I made with plot points of Bronny's location data, August.
Objection, Your Honor. This is lack of personal knowledge. The witness does not know that these plots are Bronny Parker themselves' location, simply that it's just their phone. They cannot testify to whether or not this is Bronny Parker's actual location.
Any response?
I'll allow the witness to rephrase their answer.
Okay, objection is sustained then.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead and rephrase.
It is a plot points of Bronny's cell phone location data, 8 through 12.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to move Exhibit 5 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit submitted.
Now, Mr. Mapp, was Bronny's phone ever at Randolph River, the site of the second robbery?
The data showed me that Bronny wasn't anywhere in Randolph River on any of the 4 days I had examined.
And was the phone at Dillsville Bank the day it was robbed?
No, but it was in Dillsville all 4 days, but that would make sense because that's where she lives.
And do you have any reason to believe that Bronny doesn't take her phone with her everywhere?
No, I think most people do these days.
Now, at this time, the prosecution can stop sharing. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Mapp, did you come to an ultimate conclusion about the case?
Yes.
Did you share your conclusion with anyone?
I shared my findings and Exhibit 5 with Detective Kress.
Now, how did Kress react?
He blew me off. The detectives told me they didn't need any help with their investigation.
Did anything specifically stand out?
Yeah, he said, I know a criminal when I see one.
Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay.
Pause.
I'll withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Mapp, what you said Kress, did you say Kress blew you off?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion that you shared with Kress that he blew you off on?
That it was very unlikely that Bronny Parker was the robber.
Thank you, Mr. Mapp. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mapp. So, you said that location tracking technology isn't foolproof, right?
Yeah, but it's very reliable.
Okay, and even if it were to work perfectly, Mr. Parker could have just turned off their phone, right?
Yes.
Okay, and they also could have turned off their phone's location services.
Yes, but sometimes even Google will track in the background processes.
Okay, and it's also possible they just didn't connect to any Google services at the times of the robberies.
Yeah.
All right, so if you add it up, based on your expertise, it's possible that Ms. Parker, who's well-versed in computers, would have known about these loopholes as well.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Based off your expertise, is it possible that Ms. Parker knows about these loopholes in GPS tracking?
I mean, it's common knowledge. Anyone can know about it.
So that's a yes, it's possible, because it's common knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, and on direct, you mentioned a map you made of Ms. Parker's phone's location data, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I'm now bringing forth Exhibit 5. Its authenticity has been previously stipulated. Now, this map shows time and locations where Parker's phone was present, right?
That is correct.
Okay, really quick, I'd like to point out that this map shows Parker's location before every single morning at Kiara's Yoga and Coffee, right?
Yes.
Okay. Additionally, the device's location on August 9th at 9 o'clock, the time of the robbery, is not shown, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
There's also nothing after 8:05?
Yes.
So, based off the evidence that you just presented to the court, Ms. Parker has no alibi at the time of the robbery on the 9th.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mapp. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the witness may step down. And if the scoring judges could turn their cameras on again, so I have a sense of when people are done with their comments, that would be great. All right, third witness for the defense.
Before I call my witness, I would like to just clarify that I have moved rooms for the sake of our internet connection, so there might be some like light noise, or you might notice there's a different background. So I just wanted to like add that I moved.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, the defense would now like to call defendant Bronnie Parker to the stand. Okay. Hello, Ms. Parker.
Hello.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Bronnie Parker. That's spelled Parker.
And what city or town do you currently reside in, Ms. Parker?
I currently live in Dolesville.
And where did you live prior to Dolesville?
I lived in Coho City, and that was from 2009 to 2018. When I was living in Coho, I used that period of my life to just really get my lifestyle on a better track.
Could you briefly clarify what you mean when you say you changed your lifestyle for the better?
Yeah, so before I moved to Coho, my life was just full of working odd jobs and barely being able to make ends meet. So when I ended up moving to Coho, I decided that it was a great opportunity to put myself through college. And I even got a job at the landscape company. I was in college. It was there that I got my associate's degree in computer security in 2014. I used that at my job doing security.
Okay. What type of work did you perform for doing security?
At doing it, I was a technician. So that means that I regularly scheduled security upgrades and inspections at multiple different companies, including both branches of Coho Community Bank.
Were you acquainted with the manager of either bank?
Yes, Lolo Baldwin. That was the manager of the Jonesville branch.
Were there any interactions you had with Mr. Baldwin while working there that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so Lolo would often approve security upgrades in advance and then later deny that they ever did so and refused to pay.
Objection, Your Honor. This is character evidence.
Response?
I meant this question just to build background about Mr. Baldwin. Perhaps if the defendant could rephrase their answer in some way that doesn't include the character evidence.
Well, could you tell me again, what was your question?
I simply asked, were there any interactions you had with Mr. Baldwin while working there that stuck out to you?
Okay, well, let's do this. I'll treat it as the question was withdrawn the first time and the objection sustained, and we'll try it again.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, were there any interactions you had with Mr. Baldwin while working there that stuck out to you, keeping the character evidence out of it?
Most of our interactions included approving security upgrades or general services in advance.
Did you ever suggest or schedule any security upgrades that would have taken place in August?
I don't remember ever doing that. Even if I did, it's part of my job or what I was doing. And I did that for companies all the time. It's not something that sticks out very well in my memory, and it wasn't a very memorable experience. So even if it did happen, I don't remember ever doing it.
Moving on from that matter, what made you move from Coho City to Dolesville, Ms. Parker?
Yeah, so I found a house in Dolesville and finally had enough money to make a down payment on it. The bank let me get a mortgage on it, even though my credit wasn't the best. Yeah.
And how did you do in regards to paying off the mortgage on that house?
I was able to make my payments in full and on time until February, when unfortunately I had to miss the following month after doing Let Go. I remember when I found out about them letting me go that I was crying in the parking lot.
Did Lolo Baldwin attempt to contact you about the late payments?
In late May, Lolo had come to my house and asked if everything was all right, and had asked about the payments. When I had explained my situation regarding being let go and just being in a financial hard spot at the time, Lolo seemed very understanding, and I just remember feeling very supported by the bank. Lolo made it sound like they'd be able to figure out a way to help me get out of the situation. They never ever mentioned a July 1st deadline for anything.
At this time, the defense would like to present Exhibit 4, which has already been submitted into evidence by the prosecution. Ms. Parker, could you please read the date that this letter was written?
It says it was written July 6th.
Did you see this letter before August 13th?
No, even if it was in my mailbox then, I don't check my box very frequently. Um, so I didn't see it.
When did you see the letter, Ms. Parker?
I didn't see it until November, December, and the date produced it for.
How did you know what you needed to pay the bank, if not through the letter?
It was from my most recent mortgage statement, which I got in a month prior. So they must have sent that letter shown in the after I
At this time, the defense would like to stop sharing Exhibit 4. Now, Ms. Parker, did you attempt to make contact with Mr. Baldwin after his visit?
I tried to talk to them on August 8th, but when I got to the bank, I realized that it was closed since it was a Sunday. Sometimes you just forget the days of the week when you are unemployed.
When did you next go to the bank?
I didn't go back to the bank until the 12th of August, and that was when I paid off my mortgage.
Well, how did you come up with the money to pay off your mortgage payments?
After careful consideration, I decided on my own that I would need to sell my car to come up with most of what I needed to make the mortgage payment. I was able to luck out and I sold it for $5,000.
And how did you go about selling your car?
I posted an ad on Craigslist the morning of the 9th. and was able to get a response within the hour. I forgot to give the guy who bought it the title to the car, but it was never brought up. It was an honest mistake. And besides, Craigslist isn't as thorough as the DMV, so again, it slipped my mind at the time.
Now, moving on to the events of the robbery, did you do anything of note on the afternoon of the 9th?
I took a bus up to Chalmers Casino to see if I could get any extra money playing poker.
What did you do at the casino on the 9th?
I got there 4:30, spoke to Pat Hurst, and then went to go play poker. I went in with about $2,000 and came out with $3 or $4 grand that day. I'm pretty good at poker, so that is a pretty normal thing for me to come out with a large amount of money. I then took a bus home, and I didn't see anyone else that day.
And what did you do on the 10th?
I stayed home that day. I would have paid it off that day, but I was confident that if I went back to the casino on the 11th, that I'd be able to make more money.
Did you speak with Miss Hurst when you went back to the casino on the 11th?
Yeah, when I was getting in my chips after earning more money, I mentioned something to Pat about owing the bank and asked Pat to write a check for the exact amount I owed.
Okay.
And I gave her the extra necessary cash. And then I went home at about 3:30.
And when did you pay that check to the bank?
I went there the next day on the 12th, and I gave Lola the check. When they asked how I got the money,
All right,
I
so
told
your
them
your time is up,
we're
but
pretty happy.
the prosecution had an extra 30 seconds, so if you need to finish your sentence, go ahead.
And I told Lolo about how I had earned the money. We were both pretty happy I was able to pay off all the mortgage.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Parker. No more questions, Your Honor, and the defense rests its case.
Okay, any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, I'd like to ask how much time I have remaining on cross.
You have 6 minutes and 46 seconds.
All right. Additionally, I'd also like to ask that the witness turn their camera off, potentially to solve some of the Wi-Fi issues that we're having. Just trying to make the trial run a bit smoother. Good afternoon, Ms. Parker. You performed inspections on Cascade Bank when you worked doing security, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And part of your job was suggesting that new security systems be installed, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so if the bank were installing new cameras, you would have been the one who allowed it.
For the most part, yes.
And early in 2021, you got fired from doing security.
Unfortunately, yes.
Mm-hmm. And your employer told you that the reason you were fired was claims of embezzlement?
Objection, Your Honor. This is Rule 404. You're using outside evidence to try and prove that how Bronnie Parker might have acted in regards to the matter at hand.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor, this is within the case packet, so this does not fall under outside evidence.
Well, I think the objection was it was under Rule 404, prior bad act. Is that right, counsel?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Well, Your Honor, give me 1 second to view the case packet. Under Rule 608 sub A, cross attorney is allowed to inquire into untruthfulness in specific instances, and this is a specific instance of untruthfulness.
But but it's a specific instance that has not been proven.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm not asking Ms. Parker if she embezzled money. I'm asking if she was fired for claims of embezzlement. I'm not asking for anything to be proven. I'm just asking why she was told she was fired.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yeah, one final time.
Yeah. So under Rule 608, I don't think this is actually probative for truthfulness in relation to how much prejudice it adds to this case. I think this is simply just a matter of trying to prejudice the jury, and I think it does not really show as much truthfulness as would outweigh the prejudice that it's adding, especially when it's not a claim that's been proven or substantiated.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah, respond to that.
Yeah, embezzlement is a crime of stealing money. And in this case, Brownie Parker stole the money and lied about stealing the money. So I would argue that this is very much a case of untruthfulness.
Right, but the objection now, I think, is 403, that the probative value is outweighed by the unfair prejudice. Can you respond to that?
Yes, Your Honor. The probative value is much higher than prejudicial value in this situation because not only does this prove a reputation of untruthfulness and untrustworthiness, but additionally it establishes motive specifically for Brownie Parker robbing a bank serviced by a company that he used to work for.
Could I please respond to this one more time?
Yes.
So I noticed the prosecution argued that this is an instance of Miss Parker lying about stealing money. But again, that's not substantiated. The prosecution is assuming that Miss Parker stole the money when they have no evidence to prove as much. So again, this is clearly more prejudice than it's worth.
Okay, so I'm going to allow the question. The witness can either say yes or no, or whatever the answer is, but there won't be any extrinsic evidence of the alleged embezzlement. So,
thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Parker, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so your employer told you that you were fired because of claims of embezzlement, right?
Unfounded.
But that was why you were fired?
That was their reason for firing me, but whether
Okay.
or not it was actually true.
Let's talk about your mortgage, Ms. Parker. You stopped paying because you lost your job, obviously, right?
Yeah, it was either pay my mortgage or have food on my table. So,
And this was the mortgage on your dream house?
yes, a house that I quite liked, yes.
Okay. And after you were fired, you knew you only had 1 month of payments for your mortgage left, right?
If I wanted to keep eating, yes, that is correct.
And you still didn't have a job after that month?
I was having a really hard time finding a job, so that is correct.
I see. And April, March, and May passed without a single payment being made or you getting a job, right?
Again, I was looking for a job that entire time, but I wasn't able to get one during that span.
I see. And since you got desperate, you sold your car, right?
After careful deliberation, yes. I live in what's known as a food desert, so selling my car was kind of a last resort for me.
Okay, very much last resort. All right. So this was a blue car, right?
Dark blue car, yes.
Okay. And it was pretty old too. A 1991 model?
Yes, that is correct.
And you sold this 30-year-old car for roughly $5,000, more than twice its value, right?
I lucked out on being able to sell it for that amount, but yeah.
Okay. And you sold this to somebody who allegedly said they were a collector, right?
Yes, that is correct.
But you can't testify to this car having any sort of collectible value.
I wouldn't know. I'm not much of a car person, so.
And this supposed collector never asked for a title?
It must have slipped their mind too, as it did mine.
All right, Ms. Parker, finally, let's take a look at August 9th and 11th. You said you had been home alone on the mornings of both robberies. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Okay. And at the times you say you were at home, nobody saw you at your house?
No, I live alone, so I don't know why anyone would see me at my house.
Right. So there's nobody to prove that you were at home, right?
That is correct.
Okay, let's really quick circle back to this claim you just made about being home alone. You earlier today saw Mr. Matt present evidence that shows you were at Kio's Yogurt and Coffee in the mornings of both robberies, correct?
Yes, that's one of my favorite places to go get coffee from.
But you can't testify to going to Kio's Yogurt and Coffee on the day of either robbery, can you?
No, I wasn't really sure when the robberies occurred as I wasn't there.
But you can't testify to going to Kio's Yogurt and Coffee on the days of either robbery?
No, again, I didn't know when the robberies took place, so.
Okay, so moving on, after the robberies, you went to Thomas Casino.
Yes, that is correct.
And when you visited Chalmers Casino on the days of the robberies, the money you gave McHurst were small, crumpled bills, correct?
Yeah, that's what I had on me, so.
And they were in a brown paper bag?
Yeah, I keep my money in a bag when it's spare. I don't keep all of my money in my wallet.
So that's a yes. After the bank robberies, you gave McHurst small, crumpled bills in a brown paper bag.
Yes, that's where I keep my money.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Parker. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right, since we're out of time, I'll ask the witness to step down and give our judges a few seconds to score. Okay, closing argument for the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I ask that all my remaining time be reserved for rebuttal?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. Members of the jury, add it up. Mix Parker was desperate. Desperate to save everything she had ever worked towards. Desperate to save her reputation. Desperate to save their home, her American dream. But Miss Parker was a gambler, and she was willing to gamble her way out. She was willing to gamble years in jail for her home. Why? She had all the cards laid out for her. Her knowledge of the bank's security system, her friends Lolo Baldwin and Pat Hearst, and her knowledge of the banks to rob them both at gunpoint. Miss Parker was out of options. She was over 5 months behind on her mortgage payments. She owed over $5,000 to the Cascade Community Bank. And because she was fired from her previous job and were unable to get a new one, there was simply no way for her to get the money she owed before losing her home. The defense has claimed that Ms. Parker had another option, that she sold her car. But even Ms. Parker has testified that she was surprised when she got $5,000 for her 30-year-old blue sedan. Ms. Parker knew about the foreclosure that was happening just days after the robberies occurred, and one day before she paid off her mortgage, in the exact amount due. She had a friend at the bank, Lolo Baldwin. Ms. Parker took advantage of Mr. Baldwin, being able to push out her foreclosure dates until August. Conveniently, when the bank was replacing their security cameras, the banks were robbed. You've heard that it's Ms. Parker herself who scheduled the replacement. She took advantage of that. She took advantage of knowing how much money was behind the counters from her previous job at doing security. The first robbery occurred on the 9th at the Dolesville branch of the Cascade Community Bank. You've seen how Detective Elliot Kress responded to the call. As soon as he got onto the scene, he interviewed Mr. Baldwin and Johnny Connolly. And as you have heard from Detective Kress, Mr. Baldwin's description was far more reliable. You've also heard how that description matches Bronnie Parker. Another robbery occurred on the 11th, but this time bank teller Chris Perucci slipped a tracker into a bag of money. You've heard how the robber dropped the GPS at the Zell Avenue exit, which led to Chalmers Casino, where Ms. Parker just admitted to visiting hours after both the robberies. Ms. Parker brought the cash to Ms. Hurst in a brown paper bag and paid them in small bills in the same amounts the robbers stole. But it wasn't until Ms. Parker paid her mortgage off that Lolo Baldwin added it up. He was the first one to suspect Ms. Parker, and as Detective Kress went to investigate, he added it up too. 2 eyewitness accounts matching Bronnie Parker, the foreclosure looming over them. No alibi besides their own word, but Dolray Mapp, the defense's own witness, proved that to be false. The car title still in her name, security cameras conveniently down, and the GPS dropped on the exit ramp leading to Chalmers Casino. This evidence means almost nothing alone, but together, it proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Parker robbed 2 banks. In order to prove Ms. Parker's guilt, we, the prosecution, had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she robbed 2 banks. We have shown you the desperation to save everything they had ever worked towards. You have heard how Ms. Parker took advantage of their previous job, of their friends. You have seen the trail they left, and we have shown you that all the evidence adds up. This is why we are confident that after hearing all the facts and evidence in court today, you will find Bronnie Parker guilty on 2 accounts of robbery in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Closing for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, members of the jury, the case observed today is one full of holes, lack of evidence, and rushed conclusions. It is a weak attempt to quickly place blame, and if the prosecution is to get their way today, they will close the case, but the doors of injustice will be left wide open. Today, the prosecution has pulled at straws in a desperate attempt to distract you from their lack of evidence. They try to argue that since Bronnie Parker had a type of car that none of their witnesses actually ever saw, and their main witness even admits is an incredibly common car, means that she committed the robbery. That someone overpaying her for this car means she robbed a bank. That her having a black hoodie, jeans, and gloves in her home is evidence that she robbed a bank. That innocent woman paying off her mortgage balance is reasoning to believe she is capable of committing robbery. They called Allie Pinkerton, who admits that she only tracked the robber's location and has no way of knowing that it was Miss Parker. Elliot Kress admits he never looked into anyone other than Miss Parker and that he likes to act on hunches instead of concrete evidence. Despite that, he never acknowledges or looks into the different accounts of the robbers that were given. And his main witness, Lolo Baldwin, is the only one who ever said the robber fits Miss Parker's description, but then later admits that they weren't even focused on the robber's profile. The prosecution's witness can't even confirm that who they saw robbing the bank was Miss Parker. Members of the jury, that is a reasonable doubt. Furthermore, the only reason Miss Parker is being accused today is because of Lolo's tip to Elliot Kress. However, today, Lolo told us that he didn't think of Bronnie at all until days later when she came to pay her mortgage. Miss Baldwin is working backwards. She drew conclusions from a woman just paying off her mortgage to her robbing a bank. He even said himself today that Bronnie being the robber is just a possibility at the least. Today, the prosecution had to prove without a reasonable doubt that Bronnie Parker committed the robberies. This means they had to convince you that there was no doubt that Miss Parker was the robber, and they don't even get that far. They can't even prove that Parker had anything to do with the robberies. They can't even explain their rushed conclusions. They don't acknowledge Miss Parker's explanation, supported by Pat Hurst, of where she made up the mortgage balance, which I want to remind you is Mr. Baldwin's only reasoning for believing Miss Parker committed the crime. Miss Parker got the money for their mortgage from winnings at the casino and selling their car. She's a good gambler, but that doesn't add up to her robbing a bank. Miss Hurst is proof that Parker was at the casino on both days of the robberies and that she herself managed the winnings and wrote the check for the bank. Along with that, we heard Dolray Map state that Bronny Parker's cell phone data shows that Parker was not at the Dolesville bank when it was robbed and was nowhere near Randolph River during the second robbery. Today, the prosecution relied their entire case on Miss Parker possibly scheduling the new security cameras at the bank. Not only are we not sure that Bronny even scheduled these appointments, that was just a regular part of her job. The prosecution case falls apart because there was nothing ever there. Their claims of it all adding up just isn't there. All that added up today is that Bronny Parker is innocent. Members of the jury, the prosecution today has given you nothing but reasonable doubt that Miss Parker committed the crime. They were given a high burden and they didn't come close to meeting it. And unless today they have somehow convinced you beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Parker robbed the banks, then you must rule in favor of the defense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttal for the prosecution?
Yes. May I ask how much time I have remaining?
36 seconds, counsel.
Okay, thank you. The defense is asking you to look at individual facts. And yes, those facts on their own fall apart. But today, we, the prosecution, are asking you to add it up. The banks Mr. Parker worked at were robbed. No alibi. The foreclosure looming over them. 2 eyewitness accounts matching Bronny Parker. So members of the jury, add it up. Thank you.
Thank you all. The next step is to see if either side has a rule challenge. If someone could let me know first for the prosecution.
None for the prosecution, Your Honor.
And for the defense.
None, Your Honor.
Great. Okay, so we are now going to take a break. And as soon as I get to it, I'll tell you why we're taking a break. We're taking a break for our scoring judges to finish their ballots and for each team to decide the MVP award. While the judges are deliberating, the team should decide which student on the opposite team should get the most valuable participant awards. This is student-directed, no coaches allowed. Teams select the most valuable participants on the other team in recognition of exceptional performance, sportsmanship, and professionalism. Each team will award 2, one to the most valuable attorney and 1 to the most valuable witness. You get to decide who gets the awards, but not make the awards. Okay, so 5 minutes. It's now 3:03. We will come back at 3:08. All right, are our other two judges ready?
I am.
Great. Okay, so first for the outstanding witness and attorney awards, I'll ask the defense to let me know who on the prosecution they would give those awards to.
We award for MVP witness Finley Carpenter, and then for MVP attorney Samuel Selnick.
Selnick.
So hang on a second, let me make sure I just get the names right. It was Finley Carpenter, and who was the witness?
Finley Carpenter for witness.
Okay, and who was the attorney?
Samuel Selnick.
Okay. All right, and for the prosecution, who was the outstanding student attorney for the defense?
The outstanding student attorney was Ashley Metz, or sorry, Brooklyn Ramirez, with Ashley Metz as MVP witness.